Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the third webinar in SACAC's Mini Camp College. My name is Faith Fox. I'm an admissions counselor from Randolph-Macon College, and I'm really excited to share some presenters with you today that'll be presenting on resumes and activities lists. So far, we have gone over how to navigate your college search during COVID-19 and also standardized testing. So tonight we have some great information for you that'll help you when you start your college applications. Before we get started, I do want to introduce all three of our presenters, but also I want to let you guys know that unfortunately we cannot hear or see you in Zoom webinar, but we still want to interact with you. So you may see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So at any point during the presentation, if you have questions, please just press that button and submit a question, and we'll be sure to answer your questions at the end of the presentation, but we'll answer all the questions. So feel free to submit questions you may have. But with that being said, I would like to introduce our panelists. First will be Maggie. One second. Okay, Maggie.
Faith, how are you today? Thanks for having me. My name is Maggie Murphy, and I am an admissions counselor at Furman University. I've also worked in the education field as a teacher, and I'm a mom to recent high school graduates. So I'm happy to be here with you tonight.
Great. Laura?
Hello, my name is Laura Clark. I am the Associate Director of College Guidance at Providence Day School, and I'm excited to be with you all tonight, and we have a lot to share with you, so thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And Kristen?
Gonna mute myself. I'm Kristen Waldrop with the University of Tennessee. I'm a regional recruiter based in Charlotte and recruit students in North Carolina and South Carolina.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So with that being said, we will go ahead and start the presentation on resumes and activities lists. So take it away, guys.
Okay. I'm going to get started, and I think Kristen's going to be moving the slides forward. But I want to talk a little bit about the purpose of a resume and activities list. I think it's 2 slides ahead of this. There we go. Okay. So obviously colleges want to know what you do outside of your academic day. So in addition to getting your transcript, possibly test scores, essays, colleges want to know what brings you joy outside of the classroom. So how do you fill your time? What have you chosen to do outside of your academic day? And it's important that they get to know those things. The other thing is, an activities list or resume is a place for you to share all that you've been involved in as a high school student. So if you are watching this webinar and you're a rising freshman, you can start that list now, the things that you're going to be doing this year. If you're a rising senior, it's a place for you to put everything that you have completed from 9th grade on. We want you to be mindful of all the things that you do outside of the classroom. And think about what you've participated in since that freshman year. Oftentimes, your parents can help you with that too. They remember a lot as well, so please tap into their brains as well. As you're making your list, make sure that you focus on using clear and concise language as you describe your involvement. A lot of times students will think that, well, it's only a few words, but those words need to count. They need to matter. It's very important for your reader to understand exactly what you do, so make sure it's clear. And finally, colleges are looking for students to be involved on their campuses. When they look at your activities list or your resume, they're seeing the things that you've done up until the time that you are applying to college, and they want to see what kinds of things you could do on their campus. What will you contribute to their campus life? So they're thinking about what are you going to do for them as well once you're on their campus. So with that said, Maggie's going to continue to talk about kind of, I guess, the beginning of lists and how to start that list.
Thanks, Laura. So the first thing that you want to really focus on is, where do I begin? You want to create a list of your involvement and accomplishments throughout high school. And you ask yourself, what have I done outside of the classroom? You can start this by brainstorming your involvement. And like Laura said, you want to make sure that you're taking into account everything from freshman year until your current time. So I'm sure we have a variety of different age students participating today. So just keep this as sort of a living document, a running list of different things that you've been involved with. And you want to start by brainstorming your involvement. So it could be clubs and organizations, sports, theater or arts, community service, employment, hobbies and talents, maybe an internship or some job shadowing that you've done. Those are the types of things that schools are going to be looking for. Anything that you have invested quality time in. And you want to think beyond school. Just because you're listing your extracurricular activities and colleges and universities are reviewing your transcripts and so on, your activities list goes beyond the school. It can include that, but you definitely just want to include any opportunities that you've taken advantage of. The other thing I want to point out is you need to make sure that as you're listing your activities, that you're explaining what they are if it isn't obvious. So for instance, if you're going to say that you were the lead in a play, or you are part of DECA, or whatever, organization you're part of, those are self-explanatory. But sometimes we'll run across lists where students will say something like, they're a member of the Sallies. I remember reading this one time and I had no idea what the Sallies were. So all you would do is add just a little description in there, something to the effect of the Sallies are an a cappella group at our school. So that's what I mean by including specifics about it. And the other thing that I would say as you're starting to brainstorm these is you want to make sure that you include in your activities lists anything that you're involved in, and you don't want to leave it to somebody who's writing a letter of recommendation for you to mention it, or it to come up somewhere else in your application. That's good, but you want to make sure that you're highlighting this as well. The next key part of creating your activities list would be to include leadership positions or awards or special opportunities. I've listed some examples here. So for instance, president of Spanish club or first chair flutist with a youth orchestra. Maybe you're volleyball team captain or founder of an after-school tutoring club. Another thing that you could easily highlight, and I know a lot of you have jobs, is you could highlight maybe that you're a shift manager at a job or some of the special consideration or responsibilities that you've been given. Remember, the key part here is you're trying to set yourself apart from others who are also applying to an institution. This is your time to, showcase yourself and brag a bit. It isn't a time to make things up or embellish, but you definitely don't want to be shy here. You don't want to leave any of those details out. And when you think about this, don't look at it as bragging. Instead, consider it as your way of enhancing your application and really putting your best foot forward so that you have, really showcased yourself very well. You want to make for a strongest application, and by showcasing these things, that's going to do it. And then lastly here, include time frame and frequency of your involvement. So some examples would be, for instance, a hostess at Theo's Steakhouse from June 2019 to the present, or that you work 13 hours per week. Student government, 9th grade to present, class representative, 9th grade, homecoming chairperson, 10th grade, class president, 11th grade. Those types of things that are giving some context to the level of involvement and your time there. When we're reviewing applications, it becomes very evident the level of involvement and time given to whatever it is that you're listing as one of your extracurriculars. And quite honestly, it becomes evident too if you're just trying to add things during your senior year to make it look like you did something. So those of you that are, in the early stages of high school, this is a great reminder to start getting those opportunities listed and take advantage of those. And then those of you that are in 11th and 12th grade, you really want to really brainstorm and make sure that you're including all of your involvement so you can showcase that. None of us are expecting that you would do everything, but you've got to be doing something, and that's what we're looking for. Kristen, one more slide, I think.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. Thank you. So the other thing you want to do when you're creating your list is highlight and prioritize. So the first thing, you're going to organize your list based on level of involvement and importance to you. Remember, once again, the purpose of this is to set yourself apart by other or from other applicants. And you want to highlight your involvement in and accomplishments outside of grades and test scores. This will help you also as you get to the point of creating a resume, because you'll be able to determine which things you're going to really focus on and feature when you're creating that resume. For instance, if your biggest involvement is theater, you don't want to list that third or fourth or fifth down the line on your activities list. You'd want to, really start off with a kick, because you're going to be able to capture the attention of whoever is reviewing your application, and then they're going to be interested in continuing on and seeing what other involvement you've had as well. And then lastly, you want to focus on quality over quantity. It's not a contest. You're not trying to see who has the longest list. Instead, you want to focus and highlight and demonstrate your passions in the determination and initiative through the activities you've chosen throughout high school. So don't think of this as you're trying to check the box or mark off every possible category of types or ways to be involved. Instead, you want to simply highlight what it is that you've been doing and focus on your true interests and passions. All right, Kristen, you can take it away and transition into our actual resume.
Okay, so what we're looking for is a pretty simple form, nothing too fancy, nothing too cluttered, and just a simple way for us to see what you've been doing. And there's a couple of things that we are looking for. You need to make sure you have your name on the document. That's really important. A lot of people forget to put their names on documents, and sometimes we don't know how to match it to the application. So just always remember that that's a kind of a key important thing when you're doing an application for anything. And then we're also going to look for your academic profile, your awards, list of activities, your employment history if you have one, any volunteer experience, hobbies and special skills, and then anything that you've done to prepare for college. And we're going to go into each of these sections a little bit more in detail and give you some tips on to kind of think outside the box on these things and to just grow your resume, grow your professional story. This is a document that you can take with you when you go to college and add to, and then once you graduate and start looking for a job, it's something that you can just keep growing, a living document, as Maggie said, that will grow with you as you go through the next couple of years of your life. So the header is the main thing that we're looking at, and that's just your personal information. And then you can also include like a personal statement or an objective, like a career goal. And just, you don't have to include an objective or a personal statement, but if you want to, you can do that. And then a pro tip would be to make sure that everything that you have as a point of contact is professional. And when I say that, I mean, let's think about like your voicemail greeting or your email address. Make sure that it is something that when we read it, that we may not assume or know something about you by what your email address is. I'm sure people have seen some funny emails out there, and those are great for personal use, but when you're applying to colleges and jobs, we want to make sure that those are professional. And then your academic profile. So this is something that you already have information at hand. We want to know where you go to school and when you started there. And this is a really good place too to kind of show if you've moved in the middle of, like, maybe you moved in the middle of your 9th grade year. We can see a transition there, and that kind of helps us as well when we're reading the application to know if that maybe there was a deficiency in some grades, that you had a transition period, and that kind of shows us there in addition to maybe you wrote that in another personal statement on your application. We want to see your GPA and your test scores. Keep in mind, if a school is test optional, that you may want to leave that off when you are giving that to the school. I would leave it on there if you're giving it to somebody who's doing a letter of recommendation for you, or if you're applying for a scholarship that requires a resume. But when you're applying to schools that are test optional, you don't want them to see that information. And then just make sure you highlight anything that you've done that was any advanced coursework, so AP, IB, dual enrollment, that kind of thing. And if you haven't, some schools don't provide rank to their students, some of them do, but if you have that information and you think that that's something that shows strength for your application, you can include that as well. And then the list of awards. The list of achievements can be anything that you've done inside and outside of school. And we're looking for things like National Merit, AP Scholar, anything that you've been awarded in school. So like if you were like highest grade in science, or you won first place in art contest, photography, or that kind of thing. Those are kind of things that we want to know. And then just kind of keep in mind, like, the list of things are going to be on your Common App if you're doing that. So just there's a limited number of space, so you might want to prioritize them on the application and then include this in your resume. So your list of activities, so you have co-curricular activities and extracurricular activities. Your co-curricular activities are school affiliated programs, and then extracurricular, anything that happens outside of school. And so those are just some different things that you might want to think about. I always tell people, just keep a long list of if you do something, write it down, keep a journal of your activities. And then when it comes time to kind of sit down and organize them all over the course of several years, you'll have like a nice journal of all your information that you can reference back to. It's kind of hard sometimes when you're at last minute crunch and you're trying to fill out an application and you're trying to remember everything you did. If you don't have that all written down, that's where you may forget something that was like super important, that should have been on your application and that we didn't see and learn about you. So if you do have a job, or you've done an internship, or you job shadowed, or study abroad, these are kind of things that we want to know about in your employment history. And this is also something that if you're like in 9th or 10th grade right now, that you can think about adding to your experiences. So maybe over the summer, you may want to do an internship in a career area that you think you might be interested in, to see if you really are. And then that's something you can add to your resume as you go through each summer. Maybe you can do different job shadowings, or you can, extend that out into an internship the next summer, and that just shows the growth and maturity that the place where you shadowed wanted to have you back to actually work there for a summer. And then volunteer experience. So this is anything that you do that helps your community, and we want to know about it. So a pro tip would be, a lot of people are members of clubs that do fundraisers and have like canned food drives, for example. If you tell us that you're in HOSA, as the example on the screen, but you don't tell us about the canned food drive, then we don't know that you were actually participating in volunteer experiences. So we want to know about both of those things. And then hobbies and skills are the place where we can get to know you a little bit better. Some of your other skills that may not relate to the activities that you're involved in. Just note that hobbies are not the same as interests. And so save things that you're interested in. So if you have an interview in person, you can kind of talk a little bit more about things you're interested in. But you definitely want to put any hobbies or interests that you are doing in school. So think about drafting. If you think about being an engineering or architecture majors, like different classes that you're taking in high school, like drafting or engineering courses or robotics, and make sure that you're putting those on your resume. And then the college preparation. So anything that you're doing that is helping you prepare for college. And there's a lot of things on this list, but make sure that you are explaining to us what those are. So like Maggie said, she didn't know what the SALIs was. A lot of these things are new. And so as we are, as admissions counselors, removed from the younger generation and what they're doing in school and outside of school, we may not know these acronyms. So explain to us what they are and what you did and what you learned from each experience. So just a few tips. So we want to just make sure that it's concise and direct. Make sure you try to limit it to at least 1 page. 2 pages is okay, but 1 page is what we prefer. Make sure that you mention things that are unique. So different experiences that kind of show your worldview. Make sure you don't embellish, so we don't need how big your fish is, but tell us your story and tell us about you and your accomplishments. Don't be shy. And make sure you use an active voice instead of a passive voice. And emphasize special achievements. And then make sure you proofread it and go over it several times and have somebody look at it before you submit it. And then just make sure you arrange it in a good way that is easy to read, that you use bullet points. Make sure that you use a font that's easy to read and is a good size. So like a size 12 is like always a good thing to go with. Anything that how you would type a paper for a class is how you want your resume to look. And just make sure it's consistent. And that's the end of the presentation. I guess we'll take questions now.
Yes. So the first question is, if you want to be a STEM major, do you have to have STEM-based activities? And I don't know if, Maggie, do you want to start with this one, or? Is she?
Sure, I'm more than happy to. It really depends. Typically, if you want to do something in the STEM, you're already involved. Maybe you're taking some more math classes, or you are taking some engineering opportunities, that sort of thing. It also depends on the school that you are applying to. So if you are trying to get a direct admit into an engineering program or some other part of STEM, then yeah, I think it would be really beneficial for students to look for those types of opportunities and be able to access those and share them. Now, by no means does it mean if you haven't had outside STEM opportunities that you're not going to be admitted to a school. Please don't walk away with that message. But remember, you're trying to enhance your application as much as possible. And one of the ways you can do that is show not only your true interest, but also your achievements and opportunities that you've had that may make you more desirable as an applicant.
Great. The second question is, what if you don't have much activities on your resume and it seems boring? Sorry. Do you think colleges are going to shut you out because of that? And I can start with that one. No, but you need to, it's not about how many. I think Maggie mentioned this earlier. It's not about quantity, it's quality. So when you think about the end of your school day, what do you do from 4 o'clock on in addition to your homework? So are there things that you've been involved in, or are there things that you'd like to be involved in? I think it was mentioned earlier, you don't want to add a bunch of things your senior year, but each year you should be kind of figuring out the things that you love to do. And as I mentioned earlier, kind of what brings you joy. There are plenty of times when you have a student athlete and they're spending all of their time playing basketball, and that's really the one thing that they're doing, and they might do something else within their community. So they may have two things that they are able to put on their resume. So it really depends on the person, but I don't want you to, you're not boring, but you want to be thinking about the things that you do that you'll be able to continue to do in college, or things that that you really enjoy doing now that that you may want to do something similar in the college arena. Does anybody else want to add anything to that one?
No, I think it's important to know that when we're reading applications that we do like to see students who have lots of activities, but we also have students that have maybe they care for a parent or a grandparent, and they write about that in a personal statement. And so we kind of know as we're going through the application process that that's why there's not anything on that list, or that maybe it's a little bit shorter than some of their peers that they're in school with. So it's just important to let us know what's kind of going on with you. We don't expect everybody to be 100% in every club and activity, because for example, when I was in high school, I worked at Kmart in the garden center. I didn't play sports or do any really extracurricular activities. And I'm sure I probably, when I applied to college, didn't look like the most interesting person, but I could tell you about everything in that garden center. And so if anybody had asked me, that was just kind of like my go-to information. So we just let us know about you, kind of let us know what's going on. And if you leave it blank, but there's no other information, it's going to leave some gaps for us, and we just need to know that information.
Great point. Another question is, should I add descriptions to my activities? If so, how much is recommended? Does somebody, Maggie, do you want to talk a little about the Common App and maybe the...
Sure. The one thing you want to make sure of, obviously, that you are concise and that you are detailed. That doesn't mean you need to get long-winded. And so get used to really sort of streamlining your involvement, getting to the point. You don't want to lose the reader. And so, for instance, if you're going to say, oh, I participated in lacrosse, people know what lacrosse is. And so you don't need to go into great detail explaining the sport. However, for instance, if I use Kristen's example of her working at Kmart, she could be a little more detailed, and she could say garden center representative, or you can get creative, like horticulture or expert in the garden center, or however you want to do it. You definitely want to showcase, once again, and that's where the description becomes important. But you don't want to get long-winded and say too much where it's not necessary. Really prioritize and save the valuable word count for the things that are going to matter.
Great, thank you so much. And some activities lists, like on the Common App, will limit the number of characters that you're able to use. So that's why we talked about being clear and concise. The next question is, do you make a resume for every college you apply to, or do you write one and use it for all colleges you apply to? And that's why we've talked a little bit about the activities list versus a resume, and maybe using one over another. If your resume says the same thing that your activities list says on an application, you may just put the activities list in there. But I would say that for a resume, you're going to use the same resume for all your college applications, unless you're applying to a specific program where you need to be, where maybe it's an engineering program and you had a lot of experience taking some classes or doing some extracurriculars that have to do with engineering. Does anybody want to add anything to that?
I mean, that's just where you could change like the objective of the resume for each school. Make sure that you do make sure you're sending the right one. We get a lot of times different school names will be on different documents. So you just want to make sure if you are making a document specifically for a program at a certain school that you're saying like that's the form that you're sending to that school, and make sure you go back and change it to a generic form before you proceed with another school application.
Great, thank you. Next question, what do we do if we didn't receive any awards? How can we make up for it? Does getting accepted to a program count as an award?
I think that's a great question because you know what? There's only so many presidents of clubs. There's only so many captains of teams. The list goes on and on. So we certainly don't want to degrade or say, oh, well, you're not that good if you don't have the lead role in the play or that sort of thing. And you're absolutely right. That's a great question because sometimes just getting selected to be a part of certain things is in and of itself quite the accomplishment. I think of, really large high schools where you've been selected to be on the superintendent's advisory council for something, or gosh, I guess that's the only example that really comes to mind right now. But just know that it's not always about the ribbons and medals and everything else. But if there is something that you can add, that does enhance it a bit. But by no means does not having those labels or titles necessarily take away. Once again, we're looking for that participation and the just sincere involvement and genuine participation in different activities.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point, Maggie. I think too, when you're writing in, as you said, you only have so many presidents of clubs, but how you articulate what it is that you do in a club is very important. So we talk about using strong verbs. So even if you're not the president of something, it could be that you initiated something within that club, or you were in charge of something within the club. So depending upon how you talk about it, that gives your reader an understanding of, oh, that's how involved this person was in this organization.
I think that's a really good point, and it made me think actually of another example of a recent application that I've read where the student was involved with volunteering at their high school, and they were able to say that as the chairperson for an event they hosted, that they were able to raise, I think it was like $5,000 for childhood cancer research or something like that. So that's where, like you said, choosing your words and really highlighting specifics instead of just saying volunteer. You can get specific and say, what it is that you worked on and what the outcome of that was. And that's going to add more validity and just more detail, obviously, and impact to the person who's reviewing your application.
Great. Okay, another question. For volunteer experience, should I add the hours I have served at a particular organization to demonstrate my involvement? Part of that is on the common application. For some of you who are going to be using that application, they will ask you how many hours per weeks per year do you do that activity. And I think it was mentioned earlier about putting things in the order of importance to you if you're doing an activities list. So when we think about that, the hours per week, weeks per year, that actually shows how involved you really are. So yes, you may be asked to do that. For the resume piece, Kristen, would you add anything to that?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Do you recommend writing your resume now because I'm a junior going, I guess, into senior year?
Yes. The sooner you can get started, the better. And like I said earlier, if you don't want to make it like a Word document just yet, keep a journal, keep a notebook that you write everything down in, that you keep with you all the time, that you can reference back to when it comes time to make the formal document.
It's also a great way to, like Kristen said, you know, if you have this sort of running list, or, you know, you're starting to create that document, that can lead to some other benefits for other portions of your application. So perhaps you're going to focus on something you've been involved with, and then you'll decide, you know what, that would be a great person to ask for a letter of recommendation, or that sort of thing. So any details that you can keep, that you can then go back to actually construct your list and formalize a resume, is going to benefit you.
Another question is, for example, JROTC a good extracurricular to have?
Yes, it's definitely, it shows leadership, activity, like your physical training. There's so many things that are involved in that, that even if you don't plan to go on to a program in college for the military, that I would definitely include that. That's similar to like maybe earning, it's not the same, but similar to earning like an Eagle Scout, to where you know that there's been like a long time experience that's built into a program that's well known, that gives you skills that you can use. And so that's very important. I definitely make sure I added that to my resume.
It also gives you a long-standing kind of commitment to something. So that's important too for colleges to see, wow, you've been doing this. It wasn't just a month long. You've been committed to this for a good while. So, okay, next question. Can you involve experience in things that you did in your younger years, or does it have to be in your high school years? We suggest, you know, it should be 9th grade on, but maybe you did something in middle school that piqued your interest in something for high school, but it would be from freshman year on only.
Yeah, I can think of an example. If you're applying to like a program, say like a contemporary dance or a classical dance program, like if you started dancing when you were in, you know, 3rd grade, for example, like that's definitely, the school would want to know that you had 12 years of dance experience, and how many hours a week that you participated in that program. And so things like that, like very specific types of schools that you would be applying to, would want to know that information.
Good. Okay, and we have one more question. If I've participated in a number of clubs, should I mention all of them or just the more popular ones?
I think this is a very personalized, because if somebody doesn't have a lot of things to list, then they are going to want to include it so they can sort of beef up their list, for lack of a better description. Just because we may not have heard of it doesn't mean it isn't valuable to you. If it's something that you're spending your time on, then it's definitely worth including. And that's where the key part of including maybe a little description of what it is in your involvement. Some things, though, that could be detrimental would be if you were only part of a club for a couple months, or you only did something for a little bit. That might end up against you, because you would be showing that you really haven't had a long-standing commitment to it, or that you haven't stuck with something, or you've sort of jumped around. So that's where you're really going to have to evaluate your personal experience with it and determine, is this benefiting me? Is this showcasing my strengths? And is that something I should include?
Great. Oh, we have one more, sorry. Should the resume be limited to 1 page? I think, Kristen, you spoke a little bit about this too.
Yeah, 1 page should be enough to highlight your information. But if you have 2 pages or a page and a half, that's okay. It's the same kind of guidelines that you would go by a professional resume. So when you're applying for a job, you want to make sure that the person doesn't fall asleep reading your document. And so thinking about, again, the font size, your margins, like make sure it looks professional. If it goes over into a second page, that's okay.
Okay. What percentage of extracurricular activities contribute to admission opportunities?
It really depends on the school that you're applying to. Quite honestly, for larger institutions, oftentimes due to the sheer volume of applications they're going to receive, not all large institutions are going to be able to fully go through and examine word for word every bit. They also may even limit, more so than the Common App or Coalition, the amount that you can actually incorporate into your application. Some schools will take a holistic review, and so it becomes part of, after looking at academics, it becomes a big part of the review process. So that would actually be a great question that you could ask the specific schools that you plan on applying to, so that if it isn't going to be considered at all, then you're not going to submit it. And you also don't need to spend that amount of time preparing a document for something that's not going to be reviewed. Whereas if you're applying to a variety of schools and some will use it and some won't, that's where you just want to pay attention, once again, to the specifics of the institution you're going to apply to.
Okay, here's another good question. What plays a greater role in the college application? Academic achievements or clubs community service? Which would influence my chance of getting accepted the most? And we spoke earlier in the webinar about kind of everything that the colleges are getting, your transcript, your scores, your all of that, your essays. And so, as Maggie mentioned, talking about the a holistic view, they're looking at all the things that you do. I would say that academics and, that's the most important piece. How well have you done in your classes? Because will you be successful at the next level? But they're also looking to fill spots for kids that are leaving those institutions. So if you're really involved in a certain club or community service, you could very well be a part of that at that institution as well. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would just encourage you to reach out to your admissions counselor at the schools that you're applying and ask them. Some schools do a holistic admissions and they want to see everything about you, and some schools have a different process. And so you just want to reach out. That's what we're here for. Each school has somebody for your territory and that they're assigned to help you, kind of guide you through the process. It's not too early right now to start asking those questions so you can make sure you're doing the right thing. And I would, just make sure that you kind of, again, keep that journal. Like this school, this is information I need to make sure I've done for them, and this school is looking for that. And just make sure you reach out to us. We're sitting at home right now in our home offices waiting for you to contact us to ask us these questions.
Yes, I hope what you've seen today is that we have these two admissions reps here that are, very approachable, very accessible, and want to get to know you. So I hope that you all feel comfortable reaching out to the admissions reps to ask those questions. That's a really good point. Okay, so go ahead.
I wanted to say one more thing. Also, some schools, this is another question to ask your admissions counselor, they may use your same application and the documents that are submitted along with it for scholarships or honors programs and those kinds of things. So think about a little bit more than just being admitted. Where else could those documents go? So just if you just do the activities list, that's fine. But if you qualify for a scholarship, then maybe there's an interview process with that. You may get a call, say, hey, you have an interview, we need a copy of your resume, and you don't have one. That would be kind of a situation where it'd be really good just to go ahead and do everything all up front.
Great. We have a question about how many schools should someone apply to, and I know that with the students that I work with, it really depends on the college list. We talk about the academic fit, the social fit, and the financial fit. And so depending upon where you are as a family, how far away do you want to be from home? Do you want some state institutions, private institutions? So I would, typically at our school, students may apply to 6 to 8 schools. That's normal. But if a student has a school, if we're also looking at likely schools, possible schools, and reach schools, if I'm a student and I have 6 reaches on my list, I might be told that I should put a couple likelies on there and a couple possibles. So I think it really varies, but I would say, at least at our school, about 6 to 8 schools. Some may be more, but it also costs money to apply to colleges too, and they do have fee waivers, but you have to keep that in mind as well.
The other thing I would add, Laura, too, is if possible, do yourself the favor and do your investigating on the front end. The more time that you can spend, and I know that obviously we're living in a different time right now with COVID and some of the restrictions on visiting campuses and that sort of thing, but the more investigating you can do on the front end and sort of have an honest conversation with yourself and say, you know what, is this really somewhere that I could see myself? You don't want to limit yourself, but you also don't want to waste your time. If you have absolutely no intention of going to a school, but you're just trying to collect acceptance letters, you're doing it for the wrong reason. You really want to focus on where you could see yourself. And I think it's great, like you said, the stretch schools or reaches and the ones that you're comfortable with, and so on and so forth. And then go from there. But if you're getting above 10 applications, you might want to ask yourself, am I really being true to myself here?
Good point. And on that note, I'm going to ask Faith maybe to come back and wrap this up.
All right, thank you so much. That will wrap up our webinar on resumes and activities list. Thank you, Kristen, Maggie, and Laura, for the great information you've shared with these students on how to prepare the resumes and activities list and putting them to good use in their college applications. Thank you so much for joining us. For all the attendees, please watch your emails. You'll be receiving information about our next webinar, which will be about how to apply to college and write an effective essay. So we're really excited to share that information with you all. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any other questions, feel free. I think you all have our emails, so send us emails. This webinar was recorded and we will put it on the website for you guys all to go back and review if you need to do so. But thank you so much. We will see you guys all soon.